Tragically, I lost my son Ben to a fentanyl overdose. It was the hardest thing I had ever had to endure. It's happening across Canada. Fentanyl is wiping out an entire generation of our people. So we started a foundation, Guardians of Recovery, to help people with mental health and addictions who are struggling and not included in society. We've done a great job of including people with disabilities in our society. Now imagine a world where people with mental health and addictions have that same level of inclusion. That's what we're about to do. We are inviting you to take part in one of the most progressive and creative initiatives of our time, building sober living homes for our people to make sure they are cared for and have an opportunity to completely come off substance and live normal, productive lives. Well, hello, everybody. It's another evening at Guardians of Recovery. I'm Tina Olivero, founder of Guardians and fondly known as Ben's mom these days. My son had a tragic death last summer with a fentanyl overdose. And since then, we have been talking to people who have had the same types of struggles and the same types of issues in their lives. Mental health and addictions is a huge, huge, huge issue. And I'm super happy to announce this evening that we have a special guest to share his story with us. Sheldon Crocker, welcome. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you, Tina, for having me here.
Awesome. So Sheldon has faced more than his fair share of challenges in life. And as a person who's virtually overcome disability and addiction, he understands the importance of having a positive mindset, determination, perseverance, and a very positive attitude in life. So tonight's show is going to be about Sheldon's journey, where it began with a diagnosis of a disability at a very young age. And he's going to kind of take us through his life and up to where we are today, which luckily has a full circle moment, and he's done some really great things, including publishing his own books. So it's an interesting journey. And how about we go all the way back and start from where you were from, and what life was like for you as a kid, and we'll just roll it from there.
All the ways back. Well, my name is Sheldon Crocker from a little tiny outport community called Chance Cove. It's in Trinity Bay area here in Newfoundland. Mm-hmm. And I was born with a disability called Arthrogryposis. Now, you might wonder, what is arthrogryposis? Well, it affects your joints and muscles and ligaments. I was born without having any bicep muscles. And physically, I cannot raise my arms any higher than my chest. So I always had to work twice as hard as anybody else or most other people to accomplish anything. I was born with 2 straight arms. And I was like 3 years old when the doctor gave me surgery on my right arm. And so it would always be bent. So I go around now with one straight arm or one bent arm. People say, well, how do you manage it? How does that work? Well, it's a good thing that one arm is bent because I feed myself. I can wash my own face, and I can do other things for myself. And the longer arms for opening doors and closing doors and carrying bags of groceries and whatever else. So I was the only person in the small community, in my opinion, and with a physical disability. Yes, there are a lot of other types of disabilities as well, but from my understanding, I was the only person there with a physical disability. So I was always laughed at and picked at and bullied and made fun of, or at least that's how I felt. I always never ever felt included. I never ever felt like I was part of the crowd. So I went through a lot of stress and depressions and not having any friends, not feeling like I had any friends. So at a very young age, I started hanging around with people who were much older than me. So I always hung around people that's at least 5 or 6 years older than me, and they always hung around with people that's 5 or 6 years older than them. So I started getting alcohol and drugs at a very young age, like 8 or 9 years old. When I took my first joint, I was like 10 years old, maybe.
Uh-huh.
So I was really young when I first started, and I started drinking when I was like 7. I had a long life of doing that, and these people didn't care just as long as they would keep up and drink and do drugs as much as they could. That's all they cared about fitting in, as long as you can party as much as they did. And so we didn't have to worry about seeing any police officers at around the bay where I'm from. We might have seen them probably at the most once a month.
Yeah.
Drive through the community, so you can basically walk down the street free reign. Just drinking, doing drugs, whatever if you wanted to.
Mhm. How many people, sorry, Sheldon,
Yeah,
how many people lived in your community?
yeah. Well, back then there was more back there then than what there is now. But my understanding, what was back there then, there was the fishery, the cod fishery was still on to go back then. So
Mhm.
it was about 550 at most. I think now it's down to less than 300.
Okay.
There's
Gotcha.
300 people, not 300,000.
Mhm.
Right? So it's only like 300 or 400 people at the most, and everybody knew everybody, which was a bad thing. But I shortly was told not to do certain things, so I went against. I was always known as the rebel. I was always known as the person to go against the norm and do things my own way.
Yeah.
So the physical obstacles were significant, but I come to realize that they were actually instilled in me a determination and adaptability to become the cornerstones of my resilience. So these days I speak a lot about resilience, and that's mostly all I do in my public talking as an inspirational speaker.
Mhm.
I speak mostly about developing resilience and growing resilience and how we can all be resilient.
Yeah.
So, I learned to view each challenge not as a barrier, but as a chance to innovate and grow, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think people with disabilities really get that at, a very, very deep level because there is so much to overcome in terms of a physical disability. Like you said, you can wash your face and you can have uh, there's all kinds of independence, but there's still limitations, and therefore you have to get super creative about how you're going to overcome that limitation and how you're going to make that goal happen anyway, which it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't surprise me that you ended up where you were because those pains of the past become purpose of the future. And these days, Sheldon, is a public speaker, has published his own book. So we're going to get into that now. But before we do, let's take a really deep dive for people who are struggling with addiction themselves. What's most important, our intention with the show is really to show people that there is a way out.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could take us through the darkness and lead us through to the light.
Yes. Well, the battles with addiction was just a core part of my story. But I lived on the streets. I didn't have a penny to my name. There was a few times when I left the club or left the place where I was doing the drugs and drinking that I would actually look up to the Lord and say, let me find some food on the way home, because that's how hungry I was. I didn't save no money for nothing. There was at least once for sure that as I was walking, I seen a donut on the sidewalk that I actually stopped and picked the donut off the ground and ate it because I didn't have no other food, because I was hungry, because I was drinking all and drugging all my money away. So
Mhm.
there's no lonelier feeling, and there's many types of addictions I know. So there's nothing worse than if you got a gambling addiction, for example, and there's nothing more dreadful than hearing them when you're playing the video lottery terminals and hearing the empty sound, like the error sound when you're out of money, and knowing that is your last money. You have no money for nothing. And telling the Lord you'd like to find some food. So, but I managed to sleep on the park benches. I managed to go to There's been times I actually had to eat out of garbage cans. I know other people's been through times like this as well.
Yeah, they
There's been
certainly.
time. There's been times that I tried. I intention. There was times I intentionally got drunk so that I would be picked up by the police and put in the drunk tank or whatever, so that I would have a place to stay for the night. There was times I intentionally got drunk, knowing that it might not have been a 5-star restaurant's meal, but at least I would get breakfast in the morning at the drunk tank, some sort of a breakfast, even
Yeah.
if it was just a slice of toast. I mean,
You can imagine how many times I've heard that, and that was the shocker to me, that people would act out specifically so that they could get back to jail, or back to um, like just a place where they were the drunk tank, or a place where they were taken care of, fed, not going to die from overdose, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sad, sad part of our society when people need to break the law in order to feel safe. Like there's something sorely missing for people to get to that point. So when you were in active addiction, you said that you started using drugs and alcohol like at 7, alcohol at 7 and drugs at 10?
Yep.
Like, so where did you get drugs at 10 years old and alcohol?
Well, like I say, I always hung around with people who's 5 or 6 years older than me. They always hung around with people who's 5 or 6 years older than them. So it was
Right.
just down the line,
Uh-huh.
I didn't get the same amount as everybody else, but I mean I still managed to get some, you
Right.
know. So
Yeah.
that's where it all started, you know.
And so did you started to drink, and then it went to weed, and then where'd it go from there? Was
Well, I'm after it didn't necessarily progress from one to another. I was involved while I was drinking. I was also doing weed. While I was doing weed, I was also doing LSD. While I was doing LSD, I was also doing. There's a few times I didn't. I was very lucky. I didn't allow myself to do coke more than twice because I know even back then I knew that I had got a very addictive personality, and I didn't allow myself to do it more than twice because even after that second time, it's like, if I don't stop now, I never will. Um,
mm,
but I'm after doing heroin, you name it. Now as for the newer drugs, I'm going to call them. I'm just around now, like the pills and all that stuff. I was never a pill popper or nothing like that. So I was very fortunate in that way that mostly it was just weed and alcohol for me because
mhm.
I know that there's a lot of drugs around now today that I'm just glad. I was telling a friend of mine the other day, I'm glad that I quit when I did
Yeah.
because if I didn't quit when I did way back, it's been over 20 years for me now. So,
Mhm.
um, but if I was still into anything, and most likely I would have tried these newer drugs as well,
Yeah.
and it's vicious, very, very, very vicious, and I don't think anybody that's really on it got, not trying to be a downer or trying to be too negative. There's always a way through. There's always a way to reach out for help, and
Mhm.
you
It's
know,
just that the drugs are so much more dangerous and so much stronger now. I do understand what you mean. One of the things about your story that was fascinating to me was that you were still in active addiction and going to school, and succeeded to go through school while you were wasted out of your trees. Tell us about that.
yeah. Well, I managed to go to 3 colleges, and I graduated 2 of those with honors. I don't know how. I still to this day don't know how I did it, but I managed. I done business administration and I done business management at 2 different colleges, and I graduated, like I said, with honors. And I don't even remember being in college. I don't remember being there.
Well,
I came across or got in contact with a couple of the instructors many years later, and asked them if they remembered me. And they said, "Oh yes, we remember you quite well." It was they weren't all together at the same time at different times, and each one of them individually said, "Oh yes, I remember you. You were you were like quite the handful." Um,
mhm.
and I said, "Did you? Let me ask you a question. Do you remember if you gave me? Did you give me those marks to feel pity on me? Did you feel sorry for me and just pass me?" He said, "No." No, we didn't do that. What it was is that, sure, you would show up to drunk, or you would show up to college, drunk every morning. Just was a drunk or hungover every morning. And the first season, we told you to go home and rest it off and all that stuff. But as the semesters went on, we seen that you were still managing to keep up with the work, and so said, Sheldon, see if you can find your seat. See if you can find a way to get into the class, and you wouldn't. I wasn't being disruptive to nobody.
Mhm.
So there's sometimes I just pass out in the classroom. But they let me still go, and I said, "Well, how did I get the marks? How did I get the grades?" He said, "Well, when we used to get out of school, get out of class as teachers, and we used to socialize afterwards. We go to the club or whatever to have one drink before we went home, and we'd see you there, Sheldon. You might have been drunk, but you always had your books open in front of you. You
Mm.
always had your book. Say as you were drinking, you also had your book open at the same time. So I don't
Well,
remember those times. Maybe I only took it in long enough. Maybe I took it in the same time as taking the alcohol and drugs in. Maybe I only took it in long enough to remember for the exam I was having the next day. I don't know,
but somehow you were a high functioning alcoholic, essentially.
yeah. Except if you would consider it, I passed school and with good marks.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people like high functioning that get through life and continue to, but I just find it fascinating that you were doing exams and you made it through all of that. It's like, wow, I don't know. Like you said, if you had the drugs today, fentanyl and all that
Yeah.
may not have been as quite as easy to. I'm sure it wasn't easy, but
No.
just much more difficult path.
Yeah.
So
Well, I believe that it depends upon. I believe that it also depends a lot upon the person themselves as well. Like, I'm not saying that my character, I'm going to call it, it's probably not called character, but I'm going to say I don't think my character is much stronger than other people's. But it depends on your personality, depends on your traits, depends on, because some people are born with addictive personality, some people are not. That's my take on this anyway. So
yeah. Yeah, for sure. You know, uh, from research sort of dictates and says that addiction is genetic, 70% genetic. So, it's highly likely that we have, a predestiny when it comes to certain addictions within our family unit. Definitely was the case with Ben and my family. Bipolar runs through our family, addiction runs through our family. So, but wow, that's interesting. So so you had moved into St. John's by then? Is that correct?
when I was going to school, no, I was living in Clarenville. I lived in Clarenville for 7 years, and
Right.
even to this day, I might remember 6 days. People say talking about having blackouts for a couple hours or whatever. I had a 6.5 year blackout. I don't remember. I
Yeah.
do not remember living in Clarenville. I mean, yes, I remember living in Clarenville, but you asked me anything about it? I have no idea.
Wow. And then from there you came to St. John's?
Yeah, I came to St. John's afterwards because I mean I was really that's what it was on the end. I still had my addiction. Well, I always have my addictions, but I was still in active addiction. I was still in active addiction when I was living there,
Yeah.
and I knew my mother was living here in St. John's, where I'm currently living. And I said to myself, okay, I can either stay in Clarenville and drink myself and drug myself to death, or I can die trying to walk to St. John's. At least I would have a place to stay. And I knew there was like organizations here in St. John's that could help me if I was willing to take the help. And so I managed to walk. I walked every step of the way. Nobody gave me a ride at all. Believe it or not. I left
That
8 o'clock. I left 8 o'clock one morning, and I got in town about 8 o'clock the next night.
that is
Uh,
amazing. I can't believe that. That is
So people say how long it took me years to figure it out because I had a watch, but I took it off because if I was looking at my watch every 5 minutes, I probably would never have made it. But I took my watch off and put it in my backpack and started walking. One car slowed down, and somebody threw 5 or 6 cigarettes out the window at me because I was smoking it. I was smoking it at the time as well, and nobody else slow down at all. Just everybody kept on going. I was trying to hitchhike, but no one stopped. So
Wow, that's unbelievable. So you got to St. John's, your mom was here, and then take us through the years that followed and what happened.
yeah. Well, the years that followed, I was still drinking. I was still doing drugs. I get even more then because I got into the George Street scene, and I was down on George Street all the time, going to all the clubs, getting barred and kicked out of everywhere because I was drunk and passing out on the sidewalks and being put in the drunk tank to keep myself safe. And because instead of people helping me up after I got drunk, the only thing I remember is people kicking me in the ribs to see if I was still alive. Nobody would help me out. Just people walking by, give me a little kick, a little nudge, and kick me in the ribs to see if I was still there. And I was going around. I used to go to the different bars even when I had no money, and I used to when someone, for example, if you had a drink on the table and you went to the bathroom, I'd take your drink. I've taken other people's drinks because I couldn't afford it on my own, or alcohol because I couldn't afford my own.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in a bedsitter apartment that had like cockroaches all crawling on the walls, and the cops were showing up. The cops were showing up to the bedsitter. Bedsitter, that's like 4 or 5 men or whatever living together in one place. The cops were showing up like at least no less than every second day. All kinds of fights breaking out and all kinds of people getting drunk and people throwing people over balconies. And yeah, even way back then, it was still pretty rough times.
Did you did you see things like today, like people overdosing and dying?
Oh, I've seen people. Yes, I've seen a few people actually die. Go into a coma. I've seen people drop into a coma. I've seen somebody who was just after getting out of the hospital for alcohol abuse. Started drinking again. He was dead the next day. Seen people going to like you're almost where you were having a seizure. I guess you were having alcoholic seizures and just their heart to stop. And I seen 2 or 3 people died right in front of me. So
that's trauma in itself as well.
Yeah, so, but I kept going. I kept on drinking, and I kept on until I was after going. I went through probably 8 boarding houses or 8 apartments in like 8 weeks. I mean, I couldn't keep a place to live longer than a week. They were having to kick me out because I was coming home too drunk and I was too high all the time, and so.
Mm-hmm. Tracy says, I cannot imagine living in that situation. And this other Facebook user says, so scary, I know. And wow, people can't believe your story. Yeah, so if you have any questions, folks, put it in the chat. Let us know what you think. And here we have a lot happens, the horrors of addiction, 100%. Yeah, these are the horrors of addiction and the horrors of living on the streets and living in I guess those bed sitting rooms, because my brother was in those situations with bipolar. He didn't have alcohol, but he did have weed addiction from a very young age. And the places that he also had to live was horrific, even though he could have gone home to a safe home at any time. But he was definitely out of hand. That's my older brother, Robert. He's no longer with us because he passed, he was heavily medicated and lived a tortured life. But yeah, it's horrific. So it's fascinating to me that you actually made it out of there. Really, the odds were really against you. First and foremost, you had, extreme disability, and that, of course, not only physical limitations, but when you think about your self-perception, people bullying you, like you had to be thinking like, I'm different, I don't belong, I'm okay, all these different, emotional things they had to endure as well. Yep. And it sounds like you just sedated yourself for quite a long time. It's actually a miracle that you made it through with all of those things happening. So, but I'm glad you did. Thanks. More comments. I bet I better through it. And In past relapse, a guy threatened to throw me out my window. Gosh, my
Mhm.
daughter still tells me now there are situations she was in that she won't even tell me about. Yeah, that was like Ben too. Those things I won't even mention on here. Okay, yeah. So, there are things, yeah. The story, your story is a miracle for sure. Indeed, it is. Yeah, unbelievable. Okay, Sheldon. So then, what happened next? Like, did you just like
Yeah.
what was your turning time frame? What kind of
What was my turning point?
yeah,
Well, the thing is, I did live with my mother and her husband. Well, it wasn't my father, but I lived with my mother and her husband for a while, and I was still drinking. I was still doing drugs, still coming. And there was times I would come home and be so wasted or whatever, I'd actually piss in the bed.
mhm.
Is in the past. I'm not ashamed of it because I learned from it. So
It's the
um,
truth.
I
It's the
I used
truth.
to I used to piss in the bed, and it was his son's bed, but his son was after passing away just a few years before, really young. I never met his son, but his son was after passing away a few years earlier. Who was healthy, didn't do drugs or nothing like that, but he just was in the woods one day and dropped down with a heart attack. No one knows why or whatever. But anytime I used to hear my mother and him arguing all the time. He used to say, "Oh, I married you, not this drunken bum for his son who's coming home pissing in my son's bed." So he was still, because it was, like I said, his son was after dying. He still considered his sons, and so
Mhm.
I heard him arguing. So I would always hear them fighting, which would cause me to be more stressed out, which caused me to drink even more. And it came to the point that I was going to leave this part out. My mother wasn't doing too well. With her health, so I needed to find somewhere else to go because I couldn't just stay there with him because he didn't want me there to begin with, really.
Right.
Um, so I was going to college at the time. I was going to Keene College here in town, and the social worker or the guidance counselor, whatever their profession is, guidance counselor, social worker at the Keene College, used to be a social worker at this place here in town called Emmanuel House,
Yes.
which is a part of Stella's Circle organization.
Mhm.
And so she made a phone call down to them to see if it would just get me an interview about getting into there to have a place to stay or whatever.
Yeah.
And usually, typically, there's a waiting list to get into there like 6 months. Well, back then, all this happened over 20 years ago. So there was like a waiting list of like 6 months.
Mhm.
And I went there for my interview. And when the interview was over, so I said, "How long do I have to wait to see if I got a place to stay?" She said, "Oh, can you have your stuff back here for supper?" And what, today?
Wow.
And she said, "Yep." And I said, "Isn't there?" She said, "Don't you worry about the waiting list. You need a place to go." Um, so I was very lucky that I
That
went there.
that was a miracle for
Yeah.
sure.
So
Mhm.
how lucky was I that I ended up going to a college that had a guidance counselor who used to work at a place to help people with addictions.
Yeah.
And she was retired. I think it was only 3 days later she retired. So
Wow.
you know, so the timing was good for that. So I went down there and stayed for the 4 month program, but within the first week, I must have left. I said, "I quit. I'm not doing this. I'm gone. I'm leaving." I must have walked out like 5 or 6 times. Yeah,
Why?
just
Why?
packed my bag. I packed my bags and walked out 4 or 5 times because I didn't want to deal with my past shit. I didn't want to deal with my past issues. I didn't want to talk about what was on the go in my, like, why I was the way I was and why I was going through addictions, and I didn't want to talk about how I was treated as a child, and you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go very I would not go very far. I mean, I'd go and sit on their front step. I mean, but I take all my bags back and just go and sit on the front step.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and they can come out and talk to me. But there was a few times that I did go further than that, and but I can just always come back. And there was a couple of times that they actually wanted me to go and stay at it was called the Catherine Booth House. I don't know if this place is still around or not. Because I would come home after they wouldn't allow no alcohol on the premises of the Emmanuel House. I mean, there was a couple of times I would come home, but after having like even only 2 or 3 beer or drinks, and they would say, "Yeah, we think you should go down to the Catherine Booth House for a day or two and get back to your senses or whatever, because we can't allow you in here with the smell of alcohol."
Right.
So during those 2 or 3 days, I'd go back there and look in through the window. Can I come back? Can I come in? He said, "No, you're out for 2 or 3 days." So I'd go down to the Catherine Booth House again and stay sharing a hotel room, or not sharing a room with other people who were drinking and doing drugs and they were taking my cigarettes on me, and so being bullied as well as an adult,
Yeah.
but I kept going. So
Charmaine says, so happy to see how good you're doing now, Sheldon. Congratulations.
thanks.
Yeah. So eventually, did you get settled into that place? Did you at what point did you stop substance use altogether?
Well, I stayed there for the 4-month program, and I was mostly staying off the drinking and the drugs at the time. But not completely. I did have my 1 or 2 relapses or slips or whatever you want to call it, and so then I was still getting counseling. I was still getting social work counseling through Emmanuel House. I'm still in contact with Emmanuel House these days. This is over 20 years later. Because where I'm not physically able to really cook for myself and all that stuff, I have home care workers who help me prepare meals, and that's who for 20 years I had my home care was through Stella's Circle, because through their home care program. But
they're such an amazing organization, aren't they?
I believe so. I mean, I know people say, "No, Sheldon, you're only saying that you wouldn't be here only for them." No, I know for a fact I would not be alive today if it wasn't for them. I know that.
Thanks, Stella's Circle. We see you. We appreciate you.
They truly are. It's not even, most of the staff is not even the same anymore, but still they still hold the same principles. They still hold the same values and mission statement, and they're still the same in my eyes. They are anyway. Yeah. So I was still getting counseling after I moved out. I was part of their it's called Community Support Program. Actually, I was the first male that they actually the first person that they actually had in their community support program, even before they had a community support program, which is like people helping you in the community, because I'm not physically really able to pick up groceries myself that well. I mean, I'm able to pick up a few items, but nothing extreme. Or I'm not really able to use a laundromat myself because my arms are shorter, so I can't really reach to use a wipe. So they had somebody to help me with that through the town, and I was still getting counseling, as I said, and they said, "Sheldon, have you ever heard of this place called Humberwood?" Humberwood. What's Humberwood? What's that all about?
Yeah.
They said, "Oh, you go there for 21 days and you stay into their treatment center, and they help you overcome your addictions and all that." So because I was still struggling to give up, and I wanted to at that point because it was after doing the program. I just was finding it too difficult, really, on my own to stop completely. So I done the program. Went to Humberwood. Actually, first time I was supposed to go to Humberwood. The taxi van bus van showed up to my door to bring me, and I looked at it. I said, "I'm not going." They were there at my door. "I'm not going. Sorry, I'm just not going to go. I'm not going to go. Not going." So I went back to drinking again and drugging for like 3 months, an extra 3 months, until I finally made it in my mind that it's time for me to quit. It's time for me to give it all up. I'm after having enough. They said keep on quitting. I never quit quitting, So I never quit quitting until New Year's Eve. One evening, New Year's Eve came around, and I said, "Yep, today is the last time I'm going to be drinking or doing any drugs." I went out, and I don't remember how much. I know I spent every last penny I had. I didn't have no money for rent. I didn't have money for nothing. So I drank every last and done drugs with every last penny I had. And it was a new day. It was the beginning of a new day. It was the beginning of a new year. It was the beginning of, actually, I think that was the year 2000. So the year beginning of a new century, really. So I said, the beginning of a new life for me. And I went home and I called my counselor. And I said, can you book another ride for me to go see, to go to Humberwood? She said, are you sure you're going to go this time? And I said, yeah, it's time. I need to go. I have to go. I got no other choice. I need to. I have to.
Mhm.
And I said, I don't know how I'm going to manage. She said, well, it's going to be a bit of a wait. You've got like a 6-week period. You get to wait 6 weeks. It's like 6 weeks. What in the hell am I going to do for 6 weeks to stay sober and clean? And
Yeah.
she said, well, there are some programs here in town that you can probably that I can see about getting you into to tie you over until you actually get there. And so I said, okay, I'm willing to try, because I was just tired of being tired. I was tired of just
What were those
eating, you
programs
know.
you went into during the interim? So for other people
Well,
who are watching who are
yeah,
considering getting sober.
one of them was AA,
Yeah.
but for me personally, AA didn't work.
Yeah.
AA didn't work for me because, like I said, maybe I was just not in the right space in my head at the time. I don't know. But anytime I went to a meeting and hear other people's stories and hear other people's sob stories, as I used to call them, it
Mhm.
used to cause me to be more depressed. Or it would say, "Oh, geez, they didn't have so bad, or I don't have it so bad as they did." So at the same time, where I used to go to the AA that's down on Water Street. What's it called? The Triangles? No, not Triangles. It is Liverpool Avenue. The one down on Water Street. Anyway, straight
Yeah.
across the road from there was a club. I used to leave the meeting, go straight to the club. After the meeting was over, go straight to the club and drink again, because my life wasn't so bad as theirs was. Um, you know,
So that was the justification at the time.
yeah. Or they made me so depressed I got to drink it away now. So yeah. So I stopped going to AA because AA, like I said, wasn't helping. For me, it wasn't helping.
Mhm.
There was other programs as well. I don't really. There was one that was done through Eastern Health in Cordage Place. I'm not sure exactly what it was called. It was some kind of a addiction recovery thing. Anyway, so many years ago, I was heard from. Never remember the names of everything.
Right.
But so I went and I kept going to that. That was daily. You show up for an hour and have a conversation, have a chat. There's a few people who were going through the similar situations, get together and share their stories and whatnot, to help each other through. And then the time came for me to go to Humberwood. And once again, the bus showed up. I wasn't going to go. The second time, I wasn't going to go. But I was living in a basement apartment that never had no windows or nothing like that. And a bright flashing light shined through my apartment. I had no idea where it came from. There was no windows. There was no car lights, because it was in the basement apartment. But bright shining light shined through my apartment, and the song by the Beatles called "Let It Be" came on my radio, and I even just 20 odd years later, I'm still saying that my radio was not plugged in.
Wow.
My radio was not turned on. My
I hear
radio,
so many stories like that it's just like unbelievable, message from the
yeah,
universe came
yeah,
down and
yeah.
it's so
So at,
interesting.
at the same time that the light flashed, that song came on my radio, which wasn't plugged in. Let it be. There will be an answer. At the same time, I was thinking about not going again, but that's the song. I have to go. So I got on the bus, and 12 hours later, I showed up in Corner Brook. And when I showed up in Corner Brook, I showed up a day early. But I thought I was showing up the right day for him to let me in.
Oh,
I showed up a day early. I had no place to stay. Didn't know nobody in Corner Brook. They wouldn't let me stay there. But they did find me. So I went up to the Irving gas station up on Trans Canada, further away, and called down to their office. I don't know. Was it their office I called? No, I called Emmanuel House here in town.
mhm.
And I said, what am I going to do? I'm out here to stop drinking, and I haven't got a place to go until tomorrow. Right? It was it was like it was January. You know.
Wow.
So they said, we'll put you up in a motel room for tonight. I said, okay, that's nice, thank you. And at the motel room the motel that they put me up in the door right next to mine, I believe that they were a hockey team, something like college hockey team or something. They were just after winning some big tournament, so they were all drinking and
Right.
making noise. And a couple times, like they were knocking on my door. "We want to come out and join us? Want to come out and join us?" Like I was there with the corner books, the other side of the province, specifically to get away from booze. I go over there, and this people's knocking on my door. I said, "I want to go drink with them."
Right.
And doing drug. Well, obviously, there was drug. Well, not obvious, nothing's obvious, but there was drugs and everything as well. There. So I said, no, I came over here from St. John's to get away from drinking. So actually, I went down in the bar of the motel or the hotel or whatever it was, and to get away from drinking. I went into the bar and told the bartender my situation, and he said, "Free coffee all night long."
Wow. Yeah.
That's when I first started drinking coffee.
That was courageous. We got lots of comments here. That just makes me so proud of you, says Golda. And I love meetings when I get to them. Yeah, because AA does work for a lot of people. For me, meetings keeps it green. I love the way you so honestly talk about this. I do too. Authenticity and transparency is everything. Absolutely, 100%.
For
So
sure.
people are loving your stories, and we don't have a lot of time left. So let's get into what happened. What's it like at Humberwoods? Tell people what that experience is like for people who are considering it.
Personally, the way I found it, like I said, it was 20 years ago, so things might be after changing for sure. I don't know, but when I was there, I really, really, really felt connected to the people who worked there. I really felt like they cared. I really felt like they genuinely were there to really help. And as for the crowd, the other people that were participants or whatever, when I was there, some of them were really, really genuinely nice to me. Some were, but like any kind of group, not everybody's going to get along with everybody.
Yeah.
But the ones who didn't, the ones who was causing an upheaval, they were asked to leave because they were being disrespectful. No, that's not a word.
Disrespectful to all.
Yeah, disrespectful is another word. Detrimental. I was looking for detrimental to the program and the way that it was going. So they were asked to leave because they were being detrimental to everybody else's sobriety. So it wasn't helping anybody. So they were asked to leave. But I found myself really, really good connection. Actually, it was so good that I went back there for a second time. The second time I went back there was for another addiction. It was for my gambling addiction. But there's another story. There's another story altogether. But
yeah, well, that's what happens, right? A lot of the addictions go into cross addictions. So alcohol and gambling often are tied together quite a lot. Someone says, "Thank you, Sheldon. I love your story. And thank you, Tina Oliveira, for having this meeting. You're amazing and blessed." I mean, this is all about taking addiction out of the dark and bringing it into the light. And I want to kind of clue up our chat today by talking about after coming through those addictions and gaining your sobriety. Tell us about some of the greatest lessons that you learned about yourself, how you came through it, and then what you decided to do with the rest of your life after that.
Right. Well, the first thing was the organization Stella Circle, as I mentioned before, where I was after during the program. The CEO at the time, Lisa. Oh, I don't remember her last name. Wow. Anyway, her name was Lisa. Asked me if I would like to give a keynote talk at their AGM meeting. I said, me? How can I give a keynote talk in an AGM meeting? I don't know nothing. She said, "Sheldon, you got quite the story to share. You got quite, people hear you and be motivated and inspired by just your words."
Yeah.
So I said, "Okay, sure, why not? I'll go give a keynote." She said, "There's going to be 10 people there that you know." And so I said, I didn't bother to ask her at the time, is there going to be anyone else there? I just asked her, 10 people. I know 10 people. Okay. So I showed up. There was like 200 people there. 10 people, yes, I did know, but the other 190, I didn't. It was the first time I've ever given a live talk in any type ever. Right. So, she didn't lie to me. She said there was 10 people there that I knew. So I get my talk and people, I got a standing ovation for telling my story and blah, blah, whatever else. And then people come up and, I'd like for you to speak at my company's thing. I would like for you to speak here. So I started ever since then. It made me feel good to know that even though I went through all kinds of tough stuff in my life,
Hmm.
by me sharing about my story, it was helping people with their own story.
Yeah,
Was helping people to be inspired to change their own life if they wanted to or whatever.
for
So
sure.
ever since then, I've been into so much speaking opportunities as I can get my hands on, and it's only recently I got taken on to. I'm going to be giving him my highest paid speaking opportunity now next month for ExxonMobil. I'm not going to say the amount because I guess it's not necessary, but just to know that there's always hope. I always believed, my father always told me I'd never be anything besides a disabled welfare bomb. Now, there's as much as I'm going to say about my parents, but for many years, I took that as, oh, I'm not worth anything. But then years later, I realized, like, I'm going to use it to stoke my fire, to show that I can do things.
Yeah.
So anytime something goes wrong, there's always a positive inside of every negative.
There is. There's a silver lining. I mean, look at Ben. We lost Ben, and that could have been the end of me. But instead, it is the fuel. Helping other people is the thing that's keeping me alive. And you really, really took that situation and turned it around. And then you wrote. Tell us about your books before we finish up.
Right. Well, I took it as the fuel to stoke my fire, and like I said, just in my opinion, I don't think that this group who we're currently speaking in, I don't think probably would not have existed if, unfortunately, it didn't happen to your son.
Mhm.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
but because it did happen, we have this lovely group now. But as for my books, people think when I say the first book I published, I'd done it all on my own. I wanted to do it all on my own. Many years of my life, people told me that I could be an inspiration, that I could write a book about my story and all that stuff. I said, "Yeah, I'm so foolish. I can't do that. I can't do that." But then the pandemic started. Well, we all know the big C, COVID. So I started getting stressed out and frustrated, listening to the news every day, just like everybody else was, especially at the beginning when nobody knew what it was all about.
Yeah.
And I found myself out walking one day. I really had no idea where I was walking. I was just walking. And it's almost like a brick wall, invisible to me. A brick wall came up in front of me and just stopped me dead in my tracks. I didn't slow down and say, "Oh, where are you going?" I just brought up solid. And I shook my head. It's like, "Sheldon, where?" I was walking towards a liquor store after being sober for over 20 years. And the voice came in my head, "Sheldon, go home and read your journals," because this one part of the Humber program, you want to keep a daily journal of how your day was and whatever.
Yeah.
So I went home, read my journals, and as I was reading my journals, the thought came in my head about people say, "Oh, Sheldon, I'm going to start writing a book now," and I never stopped. I never stopped until I was done. At least 17 hours a day. I mean, nonstop, just zoom, right, copy and paste, right.
Mhm.
I was lucky I had my journals, because if I didn't have my journals, I probably wouldn't have much to start with. I would
Yeah.
have had to think about everything, but
And
um,
that's your first book, Keep On Walking. So it's clear to me that you've been divinely guided through this whole process, and you have a very specific path and purpose, because you
yeah.
keep coming up against these phenomenons that are like your compass saying, go this way.
Right. The reason why I call it Keep On Walking is, well, for more than one reason, but the other reason is because when I was much younger, because of my disability, the doctors told my parents most likely I would never be able to walk on my own, because I was like 6 years old before I walked. I learned to walk by bop myself down over the stairs on my rear end, or slide myself along the wall, or whatever. But
Mhm.
it's only like, time flies, like the last couple of years, but 8 years ago now, I done the Tele 10 race. No, 7 years ago, I done the Tele 10 race. And I wasn't the last person finished. So some people say the name of the book, Keep On Walking, means like an activity. But like, no, keep on walking through the journal, through your bad times. Like,
Yeah.
I believe the person needs to walk through the manure in life, the shit in life, the manure in life, in
Right.
order to get to the pretty flowers on the other side.
Yeah.
You
Precisely.
need to, because we could all just sit on our rear end and do nothing.
Mhm.
We could all just stay and say, "Oh, my life is this, my life is that." And like, this is just my opinion now. But I believe that if anyone is just saying, "Oh me, oh my," I don't. then nothing good is going to happen. It's not
Yeah.
just going to happen to you. I mean, you got
Right.
to work at it. You got to work at it.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's why I
Very,
call it keep it. Mm.
yeah. Keep on walking. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's very, very easy to fall into the victim position and to stay there. I don't have enough of this. I don't have enough of that. But the minute we actually take responsibility, like able to respond to the
Mhm.
situation, and we take massive action, really anything is possible. So that was your first book. And now you have a second book. And now you're
Yes,
public
this,
speaking. So as we finish up, what's the name of your second book?
the
Let it,
second book is called The Road to Resilience, because I believe that a person needs to continue to be resilient for their entire life once they have any type of an addiction, even if you don't have an addiction, but especially if you got an addiction. If you're not resilient, if you don't learn to be more resilient, then it's very easy to give in to your devices. It is very easy to give in to your addictions. So learning to be resilient is the most important thing, I believe. So The Road to Resilience. And the third book is going to be coming out within the next year or two. The final. So I have a course as well that, as of right now, is a DIY do-it-yourself course, but it's really beneficial and really helpful. It's based on my two books and is really helpful to people who's going through tough times, and it really helps them to conquer their own demons.
nice. And give everybody the name of your course and where they can find your books and your.
Okay. Well, sorry for cutting you off all the time, but the two books can be found on Amazon. And I also have books here at home if you want to buy any firsthand with autograph signatures. And the course is on this platform is called Thinkific,
Yeah.
THINKIFC. It's called Unleash Your Greatness. 6 weeks unleash your, well, Unleash Your Greatness, 6 weeks to inner peace, I believe it's called. Yeah.
Hmm.
I don't believe it's called. I know it's called.
Unleash Your Greatness on
Yes.
Thinkific, and your two books on Amazon. So that's where people can go and get them. And so Sheldon Crocker, and we have still some here comments. Thank you for sharing your story. I absolutely love your honesty. You're such a positive influence on others who need to hear things can turn around. Exactly. Yes. And thanks again. Lots of thanks. That's right, Sheldon. I hear you. God bless you. Okay. The phone is ringing. She has to go. Boy, and Tracy says, boy, I needed to hear that today. And wow, you've come such a long way. And great job, Sheldon. Lots of people rooting for you. So proud of you, Sheldon. You have certainly come a long, long way. And indeed, you absolutely have. So, people, if you're interested in, reading Sheldon's books or taking his course, look him up. And he's on the internet as well with your website. And yeah, it's so important to share these stories. And I love the fact that you're so authentic and honest about your journey, because the people who are going through that journey, who have, also had to root through garbage can just to find something to eat, or have broken the law just to be able to be put in jail in order to have a meal. Like these addictions, when people are left on the street, are life threatening. People are malnutrition. They're completely out of their minds. As a society, we have to do so much better. So that's what Guardians of Recovery is about. Yes, it did. Guardians came about because of a tragedy, Ben dying of a fentanyl overdose. But like you, I believe that, these things are divinely ordered here. And Ben is showing me the way every step of the way. And we're going to build sober living homes so that people can recover without having the influence of drugs and alcohol, so that people can have great lives. And to be able to really have transform, because I believe it's truly possible. It's the time. I feel that it's the time in our society to transform addiction to recovery and create sober living societies. And they're starting to pop up all over the world. And we have a number of speakers coming up as well next week. to that light, we have the first professor of addiction recovery from Leeds University going to talk to us about inclusive sober cities. And we also have a psychiatrist from Alberta who's going to talk to us about he's got his own solution for recovery programs and give us a lot of insight into the newest techniques for recovery from his own recovery programs from Alberta. So those are interesting new developments that are happening. So yeah, that's our show for this evening. An hour goes by just like that, but it was an absolute pleasure to chat with you, Sheldon. Thanks for being so courageous, telling your story, coming out the other end, writing books, doing all kinds of stuff. That's absolutely amazing. And for being truly, truly authentic. So that's it for us tonight, guys. Everybody over and out. And thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Tragically, I lost my son, Ben, to a fentanyl overdose. It was the hardest thing I had ever had to endure. It's happening across Canada. Fentanyl is wiping out an entire generation of our people. So we started a foundation, Guardians of Recovery, to help people with mental health and addictions who are struggling and not included in society. We've done a great job of including people with disabilities in our society. Now imagine a world where people with mental health and addictions have that same level of inclusion. That's what we're about to do. We are inviting you to take part in one of the most progressive and creative initiatives of our time, building sober living homes for our people to make sure they are cared for and have an opportunity to completely come off substance and live normal, productive lives.